Julie Dunn, Brooklyn Democrat. Welcome, everyone.
Jose Roger, please, Democrat.
Senior staff, please.
Michael Ryan, Executive Director.
Thank you for showing up on time. Appreciate it.
It's great to be here.
Dawn Sandow, Deputy Executive Director.
Pamela Perkins, Administrative Manager.
Nina Crispino, Director of Personnel.
Kenneth Malkin, Council Commissioner. David Danks, Director.
I'm Steve Richmond, General Counsel, BAP.
Valerie Vasquez, Director of Communications.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from May 6, 2014. Has everybody seen them? Anybody have a motion? Motion. Commissioner Michelle moves the approval of the minutes. Anybody second it? Commissioner Rogers seconds. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstained? Motion carries. Number 2 item on the agenda is the presentation on the Kronos time system. Is anybody here from Kronos? Want to step up? Mr. Ryan, you want to take over here? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Sure, what's your name?
My name is Bruce Jager, and I represent Kronos Incorporated. We provide labor management solutions for public sector accounts in the New York City area as well as other places in the country. I assume that you are in possession of the handouts that I had given?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. So just a little bit about our company. We're a billion-dollar organization. We're by far the largest that helps organizations capture time and make sure that people are getting paid properly by their union contract, if in fact they're a union employee. We are in some very well-known and local notable organizations such as the MTA, NYCHA, and many other organizations that you see represented on this first page. The interesting thing about our company is we're really the only outside vendor that has a working interface to the city's payroll system, PMS, and that's being used by NYCHA on a pay period by pay period basis. So, and that's actually a bi-directional interface. So what that means is that we're taking some information from PMS, and at the end of a pay period, we're sending information back to PMS. On the subsequent pages, I have just some representations of what our application does, some screenshots of them. You can see here on page number 2 that there's an hourly time card. There's time that's been captured for a specific employee, and it identifies how we show that we total the time based on the city's rules for totaling time, so we automatically accumulate overtime. We have a dashboard so the manager can quickly see who's not working their time. That way they can manage by exception only as opposed to hand calculating time cards and things like that. On the third page we have an administrative dashboard so that someone can actually look at one screen and determine what's going on in the organization from a labor perspective.
Let me interrupt you just for 1 second.
Sure.
For members of the public, we are currently addressing a handout that is going to be photocopied and distributed to anybody who wants one momentarily. So I apologize for you being a bit in the dark, but it won't be for much longer. Please continue, Mr. Jager.
Sure, thank you. We give managers the ability to drill down and determine where there are problems with the labor, and like for things like overtime and other issues that they may want to address. This is all by clicking on one simple screen. We automate the process of FMLA administration, and on the very last slide is the thing that makes us very unique, and that's our ability to configure very complex policies without doing any custom development. Unlike some other solutions that you might be familiar with in the city, we're able to make contract changes within 10 minutes of being told of what the contract change is. So when all of the union contracts are up for renegotiation and the rules for paying people change, we'll be able to make those changes immediately without any additional development. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Mr. May.
Yeah, if it's okay, I had a couple questions.
Sure.
Right now, are we up and on automated time, or are we still doing time cards and inputting them by hand?
So it's my understanding, I'm not an expert on what you do currently, but it's my understanding that you're doing everything by hand, and my solution would automate that process.
And what's the sign-in process for Kronos?
So for Kronos, we have a lot of different options, but the one that we're proposing is to have employees record their comings and goings by swiping a badge on a terminal.
So it's like a credit card type arrangement, you just sort of swipe,
Yeah,
and then that would log the person in, and then if they go to lunch, they would swipe it again, and then come back from lunch, and then for the end of the day, is that right?
That's correct. And
Right,
by
but-
doing so, we would eliminate, I'm sorry, but by doing so, we would eliminate any, what we call payroll inflation, which is people saying they came in at a certain time, but really a few minutes late, and that translates into millions of dollars for the organization.
And how much is it gonna cost us to get this new system?
So we have a proposal that has some discretionary components to it, and I would defer to Jerry Sullivan, who I've given my proposal to.
Gerald Sullivan, Acting Finance Director. I'm the head of payroll at the moment, and we have discussed this. We had a meeting with the Executive Director, Michael Ryan, and made a proposal. It would cost roughly $87,000 to institute the program with the machinery and the software that Kronos has, and there would be an annual upkeep of somewhere in the range of $15,000 to $25,000, depending on what we'll be doing and how we'll allow people to log in and out of the Kronos system.
Is there a sort of a continuing system for either upgrades or changes, like a maintenance system that we would pay for on an annual basis as well?
Yes. That's what Jerry referred to a moment ago. The recurring fee is actually for an annual maintenance fee, and included in annual maintenance are free upgrades.
And does the initial startup cost include the cards, or is that an additional fee?
Well, that could be an additional fee, but cards are very inexpensive, and it could be no cost if we're able to utilize an existing ID badge that the organization may have in place.
Okay. Do our cards have the coatings that they would be able to use?
We can,
I'm just saying, I doubt it, because
No.
I have a badge, so, and I got mine before they had computers, so, so I'm not sure my cards would have anything on it. But,
well, we can turn that into a very modern card by simply placing a barcode on the back of your card, and that would be, there's no charge for that.
And the credit card swipes, would we be charged per terminal? Would it be easy to have more than one terminal at each location, or would it just be one?
You would have, well, that would be a decision that you would make, but you could have one terminal per site, and it really depends upon how the site is structured. Does everybody pass through the same door, that kind of thing. But you could have one site, or you could have multiple.
And that would increase the cost?
That would increase the cost.
Commissioner Deck?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for clarity. You indicated it will be $87,000 for the startup plus the $25,000 for the annual fee?
Correct. $15,000 to $25,000, depending on what type of access we give the employees. There is also a way the employee can come in just like on the city time system where they can log in at their computer terminal, and there is a small licensing fee per employee for that. And I'm not sure if that's a recurring fee, but we included that as part of the fee, that extra access, as opposed to swiping at a terminal. It would give the employee the option to log into their computer and time in, or log in swipe in at a particular location. And the price that we based the $87,000 on was the amount of units that we have to purchase and the software that we have to buy per unit.
So you would look into it to see if we would actually have to pay $25,000 to $15,000? How would you determine that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so that number is based on, it's a percentage of the software fee and a small number for each terminal. There's a maintenance fee for each terminal. So I can I can firm up that number. There was some, like I said, some discretionary items.
Thank you.
More questions? Mr. Ryan, anything to say? Anybody in the public have any questions? Okay, thank you very much for your time. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is Michael Ryan for Tommy Sally. Tommy?
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
I believe you have, thank you, I believe you have a memo in your folders. It is a suggestion for the amounts of ballots to order for the June 24th, 2014 primary election. After I did meet with executive management, and after that, we agreed, and I wrote this, that we should stick with the concept that we have currently, in which we order ballots on a percentage of the registration totals basis. My suggestion is to knock down the percentage that we had from 75% to 65%, which of course is a 10% reduction in the amount of ballots that we order per ED, and 100 ballots per ED for affidavits in case people go to the wrong poll site, etc.
And Mr. Sally, before you get started, you go any further. If a full consensus was not met today with respect to our needs moving forward, there is a limited, at least a limited decision that we need from the commissioners today, correct? And can you go into what we need for today moving forward, and then if there's more questions that need to be addressed next week, we can certainly move forward with the balance of your presentation next week.
Certainly. What we'd like to do is have a small percentage, if possible, of the ballots being able to be printed today. That would allow us to print the test ballots for the primary election. So the operation can keep running. The staff can run the test ballots as they need to in the voting machine facilities, and the conversation can continue to come up with the total percentage of ballots that we need to order.
And what's the percentage of the ballots that we would need to reach consensus on today?
I'm not sure that there really is a set number.
What do you need?
The test ballots would not be, the test ballots themselves are not very many at all. We're talking in the thousands citywide. But what we would need to do, since ballots are required to be printed from the original run of ballots, what we would need to do is, say, a percentage, like 10%, 20% of the ballots for the election. Then those ballots can be run, plus the test ballots, so they'd be on the original run. And then if we decided to print more than that, we would be able to do that.
Well, you're recommending that we print 65% of the total number.
That's correct.
Whereas in the past it was 75%.
That's correct.
So really the question is really going with the 65% number and the 75% number. So at the very least, we can authorize right now printing the 65% number, and if the next 7 days we change our minds, we can print 10% more. Is that accurate?
That is, there's also been suggestions in the
You know what,
past.
Tommy, after you say yes, good time to stop.
You're right.
I've heard it before. I move that we authorize, at least on the contingency basis, the 65% print.
Second.
Commissioner Maine first.
Sorry, before we vote,
Well, we've been joined by the Staten Island contingent, Commissioner Cassidy and Commissioner McWeston.
just a question,
Yes, sir.
if I may. What's the difference in cost between the 65 and the 75%?
We're talking about ballots that are 39 cents. The ballot, per ballot cost is 39 cents. So knocking down 10%, we're looking at a six-figure reduction, I would say, around $100,000.
Okay, and do you know if the governor is going to change any of the residency requirements in this primary election?
I do not.
Oh, okay, neither do I.
Well, if I could jump in, this was in response to some suggestions that we begin to order ballots perhaps on an election district by election district basis. And at least in the short period of time that we've had to assess this, it is the considered opinion of the ballot management unit that that is a daunting and difficult process, and might result ultimately in the disenfranchisement of voters if the rather less than scientific approach that you would have to engage in to try to determine turnout based on prior history was to be utilized. The danger is, especially Commissioner Humane, as you alluded to, unforeseeable changes in circumstances that might require more ballots to be present at a particular location than otherwise would be under what we would call quote-unquote normal circumstances. And based on the predictions that we can do with respect to turnout, I think ballot management was comfortable with the 65% for this election cycle.
What was the largest turnout for the federal primary?
In the
Percentage-wise, in the modern era, say last 4 years.
in the 2012 primary, in the 2012 federal election, in the 7th congressional district, which covers New York, Kings, and Queens counties, turnout was around that high in some EDs, around 65%.
Commissioner, we only have one election to go on. We only had 2012. We never had a separate federal primary before that.
And which election was that?
That was the 7th?
2012 primary, federal primary involving the 7th congressional district, represented by Congresswoman Velasquez.
What about the 13th?
The 13th, the highest EDs turned out at around 40%, maybe a little bit more.
So in Kings County, you said it was 65%?
It was as hot, they were EDs as high.
Probably closer than 65%.
That contest, although there is still a 7th congressional there is a contest in the 7th congressional district. It's not as hot a race, for lack of a better term, than it was in 2012. The 13th congressional, of course, is the same, but looking at the highest EDs, and that was again around 40%. I'm comfortable with the 65% number at this point.
Your company.
Me.
Nice.
And based on the conversations that we've had in the meetings that we've had discussing this matter, I'm comfortable with Mr. Zaddy's representations and his analysis of the information as it was presented to me as well.
Well, I'd like to amend my motion now. We go with 65% to 75% in the 13th congressional district. Because notwithstanding your comfort level, I'm not saying.
Understood. Yes.
I would point out that I'm no longer in that congressional district.
Yes.
So I want 75% in that congressional district and 65%, unless anybody else wants more.
I feel confident, I'll second it.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, did you say 13, the 13th?
Correct.
Did you say 40% on 13?
Yes.
That was the turnout.
This is a very hot election this time. That's the difference.
Mr. Kamara, the motion has been made and seconded, so before we vote, you want to say something?
Yeah.
Shut up, microphone, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Alex Camarda with Citizens Union. Just wanted to point out a couple issues surrounding the printing of ballots. There's a history here. I believe dating back a couple of years, the board was once at 110% for the printing of ballots. It's been ratcheted down since. That's something that we've supported because we think it will reduce the printing costs, as has been discussed. So now we're down to the proposed 65%. We have also urged in the past that the printing of ballots take place by election district. It would be helpful to know more of the rationale as to why that can't be done. But I would say, you know, going forward, whether it's 65 or 75, this is certainly a movement in the right direction, and I praise the board for that.
I would think for this election, it's easier because it's one ballot for the whole congressional district. So I would think it would be that much more difficult if we had, say, the September primary for this year, where you have almost, you know, different ballot styles in the same polling place. Because here, if they have a multiple site, if one ED becomes inundated, they can borrow from their neighbors. And that's an additional rationale for trying to come in at the little lower number.
Anybody else?
This is the first time too that we're doing different percentages for anything other than a citywide. Every other election, you just agreed on one number, so this is a start. 65 and 75.
Motion was made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstained? Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Next item on the agenda is Michael J. Commissioner Dent.
Yeah, Mr. President, I would like to add personnel for Kings County to the agenda, the executive session.
Okay. It was already there, but.
Oh.
Mr. Ryan, you're up.
Yes, with respect to letter A under item number 3, the working together with the State Board of Elections and the Office of the Governor, as well as the vendor, ES&S, we were able to make some very good changes to the system moving forward. One of the primary changes that were made was inside the DS200 there is a read head, and the firmware, which is a fancier word for software that operates the machine. The firmware parked the ballot previously pursuant to the state certified vendor setup, parked the ballot beyond the read head. The significance of that was that when a ballot had to be rejected for a reason, one reason or another, whether the entry was too light or there was a double vote, if there was any kind of problem with the back edge of the paper, it would get caught on the read head. We found that that is roughly 50%. Now keep in mind that going from 2010, where we had over 3% of total ballots that jammed, down to 2013, where we had 0.5% of the ballots jammed, but still resulting in about 6,600 ballot jams. 50% of the ballot jams were as a result of a ballot that was needed to be rejected, that would get stuck in the machine for one reason or another. This firmware has been changed, and the state certified, and I gotta say, they really worked, did yeoman's work to get it done. This first came up in the middle of January on the state's radar screen, and it was changed as of, I think, last week or the week before. So they really worked quickly to get it through state certification. In any event, we have been able to use the firmware with the changes over the last week and a half or so, since we got a copy of it, and staff and myself and Dawn and Pam have tried to, intentionally tried to jam the machine by crumpling the back end of the ballot and seeing if it works. And so far, none of the ballots have jammed. Now, we can't say what the predictability of that is, you know, once it's field application, but we're certainly encouraged by the very small sampling of work that we were able to do internally. The other thing that there's going to be, and this will be part of the training post-primary in June and in July and August. The screenshots that are included in the commissioner's package indicate more accurate messaging, so that the poll workers, when they're using the machines, will be more specifically aware of what the next step is. And there's other changes akin to that within the context that are, you know, kind of hyper-technical. But in any event, the other big issue that we've been able to deal with is, previously, and anybody who's been a poll worker or has spoken to a poll worker knows, that the results tapes were printed from the primary portable memory device. And the results tapes, all 3 copies, had to be completely printed before the data would be then transferred to the backup portable memory device. That created, we think, and won't know fully until this real field application, but we think it created artificial zeros on the backup memory devices because of poll workers perhaps pulling the PMD too soon and the data transfer not happening. It created other problems with people getting impatient at the end of the night, perhaps pulling the primary PMD before it should have been pulled. So there's issues like that. What the new programming is done, the new firmware is going to be able to do is, instead of when the poll worker goes to close polls, instead of printing the results tapes first, it's going to write the data from the primary portable memory device to the backup portable memory device. In addition, and as an added benefit, when ES&S was looking into this, they discovered that the card in the DS200 that is there for the operating purposes that contains the firmware has sufficient memory space on it to have a copy, a data copy of the results tapes. So the results tapes will now be stored on the primary PMD, on the backup PMD, and within the DS200. What that allows, and Mr. Nordis is available for anyone, including commissioners, that wants a demonstration after the meeting is over of how these changes are going to work on the DS200. What that allows is both the primary and the backup PMDs to be pulled prior to or even during the printing of the results tapes, because the results tapes will be printing from the card that's in the DS200, not from either the primary or the backup PMD. Our hope is that that leads to a substantial speed increase of the results on election night, because those PMDs will now be able to get into the stream of commerce and get where they need to go so that the unofficial results can be uploaded. Pardon? Yeah, I mentioned the screenshot, and in the handouts there's different screenshots for the poll workers that give them better information with respect to what they need to do at the various junctures during the poll closing. So I've seen a demonstration of it. It works, and we think that that's going to be a significant enhancement to the process moving forward. So that's for the most part, that's the summary of the key changes that were made to the ES&S framework. Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, are we going to sort of update the training program and the manuals and whatnot to accommodate the changes?
Yes, and we're implementing it for June because we found that with the firmware, it is an all or nothing scenario. You either do it all and accept the ballot jam reductions and the PMDs, or you have to do it after. What we've also found from our discussions is, unless the commissioners had a significant feeling otherwise, even without the training on when the PMDs can be pulled, it essentially is no change to the poll worker. If the poll workers for this primary, because we didn't bring them all back in and engage that otherwise unnecessary expense to retrain all the poll workers, if they follow the procedure exactly the way it's currently in place for June, it will be of no difference to them. So we didn't see that we could justify bringing back the entire pool of poll workers to come in and retrain them on this one specific thing, when even if they do it the way it's always been done, the system won't change one way or the other. So hopefully there'll be some of them that will follow the directions and pull it, and those will get done more quickly. But even if they don't, even if they do it exactly the way it's always been done, and there is no speed up for the June primary, we'll still have the opportunity to train them for the in July and August for the September primary. But we also thought that it was important to get the ballot jam issues resolved and deal with what we can deal with in the sequence, the time sequence that's available. Right.
I have a question about the ballot jams. On the sample ballots we're going to be using to test the machines, are they going to be ripped from a book I know in the Bronx, I know a lot of people say we have a large majority of our ballot jams are going to open up. Some people think it's from transport. I know some of the techs in the Bronx feel it's because when they're testing the machines, they aren't getting the serrated fibers from.
Number of ballots in the packets. We started with 100, and then we decreased it down to 50 because we found that that was an issue in 2010 and 2011. We also increased the size of the stub on the top to help with the tearing of the ballots.
So, but in terms of
So
test
it's
ballots,
testing, or we're going to be simulating actual election day procedures?
well, in the test ballots, there are pre-marked, and then there are, some are hand-marked. They do the best they can to simulate what happens on election day, but I'm not certain that we actually, I think the test ballots come without a stub. That's my understanding. And the other problem that we have, quite frankly, Commissioner, is the test decking requirements are somewhat voluminous, and it takes quite a bit of time to get it done in any event. And I think to add another step to it, creates even more of a problem. Because what the test decking is there to make sure is that the timing marks are lining up so that the ballot is being properly read. It wasn't so much to deal with every potential contingency of a problem.
I thank you as well as all the staff for being proactive and trying to get this done. But do you think maybe perhaps that you can train not train everyone, but train the coordinators?
Yes, actually, there's going to be a mailing that's going out to the coordinators. And Dawn, you can take that.
We are going to email special instructions to all the coordinators that we have emails for. We're also going to mail to the coordinators. There will also be special instructions. Our AD monitors will be coming in for training. Because they are being trained, they will all be using the tablets. They will also be informed of the change in procedure. But however, like Mr. Ryan said, whether they pull it out before the tapes or after the tapes, it really doesn't make a difference. To take in all these coordinators, we felt that, the amount of money it would cost to retrain.
And given the fact that
Thank you.
Given the fact that we have roughly about 1/3 of the total poll sites that we have, in operation for a citywide, that we couldn't justify the expense of bringing staff in for an enhanced
We
training.
also met with NYPD, and they're aware of all the changes. And they were given all the information. We're also going to give them laminated cards as well.
Anything else?
The item C on my agenda, 3C, was with respect to the timekeeping system. And now that the two presentations of the various options, the two different options that we could go with, have been made, I was just seeking to see from the commissioners if we could move forward, if there was a level of comfort with respect to the two systems that were presented.
Do you have a recommendation?
I think my recommendation is that city time is going to be the way that we would need to go because of the financial aspect of it. But certainly there are two different options on the table, and if I was going to make a recommendation, my recommendation would be that we move forward with city time, and provided that there was consensus from the commissioners.
Can you tell us what the financial aspect is?
From city time, basically with city time, as was presented last week, there is very little financial outlay. The only expense that we would incur ultimately are for the quote-unquote workstations, and that would really be a question of comfort level in terms of coverage. And the workstations, just so that everybody is clear, there are three basic options of clocking in. There's the web clock, where someone could go to their desk and clock in. There is the hand scanner, which is another way to do it. And then the workstation is for someone that might have a problem with the hand scanner. So those are the issues where somebody could go right to this workstation and clock in and move forward from there. The other system that was presented today would require a significant outlay of money, and in addition to that, ongoing operating costs annually to maintain the system.
And upon your recommendation, I move that we implement the city time system. Anybody want to second it? Nobody?
I'll second it.
Oh, Commissioner Mayo second. Anybody have a comment? Or shall we vote? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstained? One opposed. Anybody else? Then 7 to 1/4, so city time will be our new timekeeping system. Please implement that as soon as possible. Commissioner Castorino.
Mr. President, I'm just concerned about the implementation and the maintenance issue. I'm sure that there's going to be a learning curve with some of our folks as they clock in, and that there may be some people that are either waiting online or end up getting blocked as sort of late. And we confronted this issue not too long ago. So perhaps we should send an email out to all our deputies to advise people that in light of this new implementation, that folks arrive to work somewhat earlier so that we don't have any issues and we confront that before it becomes an issue.
I am certain that all that communication will happen, and certainly at the Commissioner's directive will make sure it happens. But I'm also certain that there's going to be a lot of training that's going to be provided by City Time as well, because this is going to be a major undertaking. The other thing, just so that we're clear, is we have to figure out another piece, which is the poll workers, because they come in, a few times a year. They don't, dovetail very well with the City Time system. So this is going to be a situation where, this is for employees that work for us, essentially, for lack of a better term, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. We're still going to have some type of a non-automated system for the poll workers, and we're still working on it. So, employees will be dealing with the City Time moving forward. We'll get rid of the time clocks over the course of time, and I'm sure that we'll develop a schedule with the OPA folks, and we'll do a phased-in implementation. And in some of the larger boroughs that may involve, one location going up first, coming online first, and then phased in for the other locations as well.
Maybe I didn't hear you. What time frame did you say you're looking at to implement this?
We don't have a time frame. The bottom line is we had to get over this hurdle, and now we have to communicate back with City Time. And now that we have the approval, we can work with them to develop an appropriate implementation schedule. Certainly, the commissioners will be kept abreast of that as we move forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Roger?
Yes, do you know, is executive management leaning towards more hand scanning or the web-based? My concern is I don't want other people signing in, and I think the hand scan will allow us to use the cameras and other activities that we have in order to prevent that, as opposed to just signing in someone's passcode to the computer.
What City Time has recommended, at least preliminarily as far as I understand, is that there be various options. A combination of the workstations, the hand scanner, and the web clock. It's not an either or. And quite frankly, there's times, like for example, and this is not by any stretch of the imagination meant to be funny at all. If you had an employee that was missing a right hand, since it's a right hand based machine, there'd have to be an alternative way for them to clock in. If you had an employee that had broke their wrist or broke their hand and had a cast on, they couldn't do it, they'd have to have an alternative way to clock in. That would be either the workstation or at the desk. And, you know, one of the things that I like about the desk, you know, the web clock, is that it gets people going to their desk ready, as opposed to waiting online in the morning and, you know, and they will then be at their desk, and it keeps them at their desk at the end of the day, as opposed to getting up 10 minutes before or 15 minutes before and going and waiting online to clock out. So there are pros and cons, and I think that as we get closer to actual implementation, we'll have answers to those questions, because then we'll sit down and have a real working meeting with the City Time folks, as opposed to what we had now, which was a broad overview, really to get the costs in line and figure out what we needed to do moving forward from a funding perspective.
Mr. Castrina?
Executive Director, I'd like to be a part of those meetings when we do sit down with the City Time. I have some more questions. I'm concerned about the hand scanners and whether somebody's wearing a ring one day or not on the next, or somebody had a lot of salty food the day before and it's swollen. You know, all these different.
My understanding of it is it's not quite as precise as everybody wants to believe. It really is essentially the outline of your hand. It's measuring your hand size. It's not taking your fingerprints or storing fingerprints or anything like that. It really just is, you know, it's just the size of your hand that's really the issue. But certainly, you know, as we move forward, we'll invite anybody who wants to come. You know, everybody's invited to the party.
Thank you.
All right.
Commissioner Dent?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a concern, and it did come up before the City Time had presented, and that is what happens when staff goes to different locations. For example, sometimes one of the Brooklyn office staff may have to go to the voting machine facility. How is that handled, or have you addressed that yet?
My understanding is that if they're in the system, they're in the system. So they can clock in from whatever site. It's not site specific. And it'll also let you know, since it is computer based, it'll let you know where they clocked in, not necessarily just that they clocked. So it does provide, you know, more enhanced tracking of employees, because if somebody happens to take it upon themselves to go to a work site that they're not otherwise assigned to, you'll know that in a way that you might not know it now. For example, if an employee, you know, have to take the time card and bring it home, stick it in their pocket, and they can clock in basically wherever they went. I'm not aware of any instances like that happening, but if something like that were to happen, it's able to be detected. The other thing is, from folks that I've spoken to on the managerial level and other agencies that have dealt with this, all those reports that we do now, any iteration of those reports can be pulled from the City Time system, and it comes up basically in a PDF format. So if you have any employees, whether it's myself or any other manager or one of the commissioners wants to go into the system and check up on people, they'll be able to do that and do it quickly. And my understanding is within 15 minutes of an event. So if somebody clocks in at 9 o'clock, yeah, used to be on the safe side, say by 9:30, you could start going into the system and checking out who's there, what time they came in. So I think that it's really going to give us an opportunity to be more on top of the employees and keep a closer watch on folks and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Anything else? Move to go into executive session for personnel. Hang on to that.
Yes.
Anybody second it? All in favor?
Question.
Aye. Okay.
I'd like to address the board.
You can come back when we come back to executive session.
No, I want everyone to hear this. It's a message from my organization, the League of Women Voters.
Okay, when you come back, we'll listen.
Well, I want everyone here to know about the new president and the errors we had in the book, and an apology to the board. Could you play?
No, wait, no, we'll be back in 5 minutes.
As she accumulates time, will be deducted from that as a result of an illness in the family.
Thank you very much. Mr. Flex, you want to say something?
Yes, I need the mic, lost my voice. A couple of months ago, the League of Women Voters of the City of New York distributed to you fellows, they represent you, a guidebook that many people rely upon. It was an error about elections into this calendar year. A correction sheet was issued, but it was still an error. And as the new president of the League of Women Voters of the City of New York, and I'll tell you in a second how that came to be, I wish to apologize to the board, even though your PR person reached out and told them they're in error. They never made an attempt to do anything about it. 2 months ago, I informed my office that there's an error there that said no judges to be elected in the City of New York in this calendar year. A month ago, our worker, Kate Duran, also told them. But our executive director, a mistake to hire a man, it should have been a woman, I think, said, no, we can't take it from you. We can't take it from the Board of Elections. I said, will you call the board and find out if someone tips you off, or call the city clerk, which issues the official list of vacancies? No, said the director. Alan Flax, has to send an email to him. He'll bring it to their co-presidents. Why should they have co-presidents? Who's in charge? Who then will think whether they bring it to their board of directors to see whether they are in error or not. So with this idiocy, I fired the 2 co-presidents. I dissolved the board. And the executive director is now washing dishes in some bistro. I apologize to you for our putting out such an erroneous book saying there are no judges, which some of you know, dear to my heart, the election and betterment of the judiciary. And I apologize on behalf of the League of Women Voters of the City of New York. Again, people rely upon that when they should have relied upon you.
Thank you. Move to adjourn. Second. All in favor? Okay, we'll be back next Tuesday at 1:30.
Make sure you
We're going to do Staten Island Borough first, but we have a few extra people in the room today, and we're implementing something moving forward, and hopefully it'll be something that catches on. We're going to do stuff with the central office as well, and ordinarily this will be 1 employee a month with alternating each party. But for the inaugural, we're going to, for the most part, do 2, and then we'll move forward. But in any event, we decided that it was high time to start to recognize the hard work that the good men and women of the Board of Elections do on a regular and daily basis. So we asked the borough managers to come up with individuals who they thought would be appropriate to be named as employees of the month. In any event, we're starting off with Staten Island. Without further ado, we have Andrew DiLorenzo and Marianne Anderson. Queens next, since Queens is an exception to the rule as well, because I have 3 certificates for Queens. So I don't know how that worked out, but however it worked out, it worked out.
That's a good chairman.
That's
Republican chairman.
All right, we have 3 individuals that we're going to recognize from Queens: William Hurley, Antonina Minon, and Ellen Raphael. They're going to get this. Val's going to take a picture. Okay. All right. Now, For the Borough of the Bronx, we have two individuals which actually outnumber the commissioners in the Bronx presently. But we have Dorcas Valentin and Juan Montas. We have two individuals that will be recognized from the Borough of Brooklyn. John Granholm and August Edward. Commissioner Sumas had to step away, so we'll be making one presentation for the Borough of Manhattan, or the County of New York.